introduce Ambassador Nkoyo-Kogi. I mean, we had already put out their bios. If we were to spend time reading out their bios here, look, we'll spend a lot of time. So we had already put out their bios, but for the purpose of this meeting, Ambassador Toyo is the chair of the African Women Leaders Network here in Nigeria. Good evening, man. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you too. Thank you.
And also we have my mama, a woman that carries history in her. I'm so glad to have you here, Miss Yemisi Ransome Kuti. Thank you so much for being here. Again, her bio long, but for the purpose of this meeting, she is the founder of the Nigerian network of non-governmental organizations. Welcome, ma, and thank you so much for taking time to be here.
It's my pleasure, Ambassador, and to be with all of you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Awesome. So today, we're talking about the women's political movement in Nigeria, journey so far, and the way forward. So in creating a little bit of context, I mean, we celebrated 21 years of democracy last year. And we're glad that we're able to celebrate because we hit from a time point of view, we hit a milestone. But unfortunately, if we're looking at the picture that we had maybe in the first year of democracy versus the picture that we had last week, it's not significantly different, right? Society is supposed to be a representation of the people in society. And today in Nigeria, we have both male, female, we have obviously children, but they're not applied in this case. We have people living with disabilities. But then the question is, are they represented when we look at our political structure and our political office positions? The answer, and we can all agree, is no. And then when we reflect back, you know, to the pre-colonial era, we see that it wasn't the case. Women were powerful. They held strong, you know, political positions. We know about the female chiefs, right? We know about Queen Amina. We all studied her. We know about Queen Moremi. You know, so these women were strong. These women were present. But it almost seems like with colonialism came patriarchy that really ate deep into our society and our culture. And it has stayed with us, right, ever since then. And so what we've been battling is that patriarchy and how to really come out of that and take away the stereotypes of what the role of a woman should be, you know. So that's why we said, and we know that this movement has been on, and that's why we're so excited to have you people to tell us those stories. But things haven't changed. You know, I mean, to be honest, I've known about Ambassador Toyo, I've known about GADA since 2003, I think. Yes, that was the first time I heard of it, right? And, you know, so you've been doing this work. But I mean, I don't know, but things haven't really changed. So today we really want to have the conversation about these women's political movements. What have we done well? What are some of the successes, right? And moving forward, what can we do better? Obviously, with social media now, it presents an opportunity. So its boundaries are broken, it's wall-less, it's, you know, when something picks up, it really, really takes off, right? So we see that there's an opportunity there for new movements to take on. But again, whether that's the best way, whether it will lead to the change that we desire, those are the conversations that we want to be having today. So let me start with you, Ms. Ransome Kuti. Can you tell us, as a woman who has been in the political arena for a very long time, what has been your experience and what has been your journey so far?
Thank you once again, Ambassador. It's great to be here. Ambassador Nkoyo-Kogi, we all thanked you, both of you thanked you for bringing us together after such a long time. I haven't seen Nkoyo for ages. We have to thank you especially for that.
You're welcome.
For putting this together. And for giving us in our 70s, after the many, many years of engagement with the political, social terrain in Nigeria, to see the young ones like you taking on the baton and letting us know we can rest and be behind you rather than continuing to be in the forefront, going on rallies, going on, you know, these very, very exhausting pressure campaigns. That is one of the things I want everyone here to take up on board and internalize, that it is the young people that are going to do it. It is your energy that is needed. It is your creativity that's going to make it happen. It is your innovative ideas, and it's your determination not to give up. And we are here to share experiences, point out the pitfalls here and there, some of which you already know. But I'm hoping with these conversations that are continuing, not just this particular one, but the ones that you're going to have in future and at other forums, you're going to come together as one. As those, you know, who want to get over the stereotypes, let's say women can't work together, they're always jealous of each other. I think the young generation have to debunk all that, to say, no, 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 we're professionals. We understand that women are more sensitive, yes, and we're going to turn these sensitivities to strengths, and we're going to use it to work together to achieve what we need for ourselves and our children. And talking about experiences, aren't you proud that of the countries in the world that have managed the pandemic, the coronavirus pandemic effectively, they're all women. The ones that have been New Zealand, Taiwan, you know, these are the kinds of leadership that women, the kind of examples that women in leadership bring to the table. I mean, I won't talk about the countries that are in disarray, but certainly it appears they're more led by men than women. So that encourages us to know that we need women, and women are capable, competent, and they deliver for all. They're not looking after little enclaves. They see the country as their children, and they're trying to ensure that governance is experienced effectively and beneficially by everyone. And what still concerns me, sadly, is that it's not just women that are afraid to go into politics. Decent men are afraid to go into politics. Parents are afraid to allow their children to go into politics because they've worked so hard to, you know, train children to have integrity, to have honor, to have dignity, to be hardworking, you know, and then they see these political families like vampires out there, you know, and they're afraid that they're going to suck them into this corruption, arrogance, selfish, callous, and an environment that is uncaring of its people, that demonstrates incompetence, that is very largely corrupt. I mean, I'm not saying all politicians are, but I think we all agree that is the image that we all have of politicians. So those are the things that I think we all have to have in the back of our minds. Now, what have women groups been doing? You've mentioned GADA, Ambassador Nkoyo's organizations. Do you remember Kudirat Initiative for Democracy? Ward C is there. You know, and I'm talking of those that are mainly active in the South. There are many women organizations in the North, in the East, and other parts of Nigeria that have been working tirelessly for years. But I have a feeling that, you know, building capacity for policy frameworks, encouraging parliamentarians when they get there to change the system is like treating the wound when it has become distended and visible. I think we need to work more at the underlying issues, the underlying challenges and obstacles that we have. We have to ask ourselves, do we as women really believe we're equal to men? Every women's group that I have the opportunity to speak with, I ask this question: do you as a woman believe you are equal to a man? And I find many women don't believe they are. They think they should go into politics and hold office, but they still have this mindset that men are superior to women. When they should feel, they are the ones that should feel superior to men, because they are the ones that bring men into the world. So how can the things you create be superior to you? You know, I was surprised when Lagos State, who had been in the forefront of at least having a deputy female governor, a female deputy governor, agreed to have an all-male ticket. You know, it's like we women, because I'm pretty sure it was not possible without the agreement, because there are a lot of women in the political setting in Lagos State, and they must have agreed that, okay, for whatever. Why do you agree to such a thing? You know, these are the little victories that you had that you must own and not give up, never give up, you know. And then let's look at the religious challenges that we have. Christianity says man is the head. Islam says men are the protectors and that women must be obedient. Look at all the cultural underpinnings that say that men should be taught to be confident, powerful, rich, successful, and provide for the family. That's a tradition that we all think it's the normal. And women are taught to look for rich husbands, make babies, look after the home, and look for these kinds of men rather than partners who will treat them as equals, who will love them, who will respect them, and who will support them no matter what they go into, whether it's business, politics, or whatever. And then families, communities who endlessly believe that if your relation is in politics, then they must be the one that will give you money for this and that and the other. You know, make constant demands on them. And let's look at the lack of resources for running campaigns. A very expensive thing. I remember how much I personally spent because I wasn't ready to join these other parties that I felt would not allow me to independently represent my people, that I would have to be kowtowing to some power bloc. So I was happy to run with a less popular party, but it meant I had to spend my own money. And there were women, or men for that matter, who were ready to say, oh, we know this one, we know Ransome Kuti, we know antecedent, we know she will not go and chop money, we know what she has done, and we're ready to support her. People would not commit their own personal time and money. Because in other places, you find a lot of young people volunteer to run campaigns. They don't wait for you to give them money. They will also put their own 10, 20 naira, 50 naira, 100 naira, and volunteer that time. So this is the kind of new mindset we should have. And let's also look at how we can get the elite class, educated class. They seem to be disengaged. Yes. You know, even when an election is coming, they say, that's it, I must go to Europe. And
be out of the country.
I'll be out of the country. I don't want to be part of the wahala. You know, when wahala comes, I won't be there. Let's look at that. Let's look at why is it that our people want to be bribed for their votes. You know, so it's not just whether it's a man or a woman. We need a terrain that works for everybody. Then it's easy for men, women, decent people to come in who have not stolen money. Those are the things we should look at. Let's look at the political violence. Why? And the reason why there's political violence is the money. If these people don't believe that when they get there, they will have access to stealing money, they won't be ready to kill somebody to get there. You know, let's look at those things. Let's look at the kind of ways political parties operate, late night meetings, you know, things that make it difficult for women who have young children to be part. You know, we're not the only country that have political parties. People in other countries manage to do their meetings without having it in the dead of night. What are you doing in the dead of night? You know, so let's look at those kind of structures, and then let's look at government itself, the most powerful player in this field. What are the failures for domesticating and implementing various international instruments, conventions that we have signed to, we have ratified, you know, that promote equal participation in policy and governance processes? CEDAW, Protocol for the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. You know, CEDAW is about discrimination. We have a national gender policy, affirmative action for women, and they're not compelled. Political parties are not compelled. We ratify these things, domesticate them, but we do not action them. So, you know, let's look at all the instruments we already have as tools to ensure that we have equal participation. And movements like ElectHer, which is the new baby, I think, in the women's movement.
A newcomer.
New babies have to be nurtured. They have to be encouraged, because they all bring new life in the movement. I think women's movement have done quite a lot, but we need organizations like yours, Abosede, to come in, bring new life, bring young people in, bring new ideas in, and also encourage these older organizations to embrace you, to work with you. We need to come together. Is that coming together? Women groups, men groups, professional groups, academia, labor unions, we all have to come together. It's our country. It is our children that suffer when we don't have good health, good education. You know, COVID-19 has opened up our waiting call to the discrepancies that we have in the health system.
So Ma, you've touched on
the best into it.
Yes. You've touched on so many things. And again, that's just the richness of your experience and what you have seen, obviously living on earth for over 70 years. And we are very grateful. I mean, you touched on, the cultural violence, stereotypes. You touched on religious stereotypes, cultural stereotypes, the policies, both local and international, the frameworks that we should be adopting. And of course, your own personal journey. So thank you so much. Ambassador, let's come to you. So you've been in the struggle. What do you have to tell us? What did we miss, and why didn't it work? And why are we still here? And what can we do better?
So thank you again, boss, for bringing me and Yemisi together. And thank you, Yemisi, for your personal stories, as well as giving us a context. Also, I think the point about where we are, I must start by saying congratulations to ElectHer, and just to take it from there, because there is a sense in which that discussion around what ElectHer means and what the movements mean must be a bit more unpacked. Very quick one. Let me pay tribute to two great women who have left us. Professor Jadesola Akonde, who's one of the heroines of our movement. And when I use the word movement, I'll return to it in a moment to distinguish it from what the conversation we're having. A great woman, a great Nigerian woman we missed in Jadesola Akonde. And also to celebrate Professor Felicia Ekejuba, who was the first regional advisor to UNIFEM at the time, now UN Women, and who led a lot of us much younger women to embrace the work around the movements of women in Nigeria. Those two women are not the only ones. There are many others that we could celebrate, but I just wanted to put that in there. And it's important for us when we ever hold these things. And I think you owe me a responsibility, Bosse, as a younger woman, to always talk about the past and the women which we have to celebrate, because we often forget our history. And in forgetting our history, we make it look like we haven't done much, but we've done a lot. When we talk of a movement is different from the women in leadership. And I must warn, and I want to warn, please, a movement is different from ElectHer, which is an NGO. we tend to think that when NGOs come together, we form the movement. That's very different. And that's why I celebrate Jade Sola Akonde, because she was there leading her NGO, but at the same time, she was there taking women from the markets. She was taking women from the academia, from the professions at all levels. She knew how to pull us together. So that's where the movement identity and the discussion we're having today must come into attention. So please be careful to bear with me. Let me make a few contextual arguments here. What is a movement? I'm not defining it. I think a movement is something like a social organization which goes beyond the confines of an NGO and looks for the ways we can connect and identify what things bring us together and work at those things that bring us together. So there must be connections beyond our comfort level. Now, so what is the history of that? In 1929, we saw women connected. It was an issue that connected them. The market movement under the forebearers of our Auntie Yemisi also showed that there was a reason for her auntie to come together and do what she did, you know, and similar movements existed across the country. So movements are actually sometimes moments, but they are actually sometimes also an aggregation that continues over time. A lot of them happened pre-independence. They worked closely with the men to fight for independence. So there was something that used to bring them together, and that was the independence struggles, as it were. After independence, the appreciation and involvement of women fizzled out. For many years, we didn't see women in the forefront of anything. And that came with the militarization of governance. The only time we started seeing women again was in the peripheries, when the wives of the military people now started mobilizing again. As much as we are ready to disparage what women like Mariam Babangida did, it was actually a genuine movement. It wasn't a feminist movement, as some of us would have wanted it, a rights-based movement, but it was a movement. For the first time in Nigeria, women from the most remote part of Nigeria were mobilized to come out to demand to be part of the development agenda of the country. They weren't asking for political representation at the time. They were actually asking for the right to be seen and to be recognized. That was what Mariam Babangida did. That rural, because if it was so apolitical, they wouldn't have fought her so hard. And the fighting, that is why when Mrs. Babacha came and took over, she went family support, you know? So as if to take you back to what you are used to, because people said, look at this Mariam Babangida, she's brought out all our wives and our mothers from the back corners of their rooms. We didn't know these Hausa women covering their hair. We didn't know these Yoruba women carrying their children 3-4 times in their back. And you know, they were used to having twins, a lot of Yoruba women with their twins. They will carry one twin here, like you, boss, carry one here, carry one there. All of them came out courtesy of Mrs. Babangida. Here in the riverine areas, you know us with our Ogogoro women and everything. We all came out because of the rural, the better life for rural women. I say this to you younger women because I fear that you don't know that our stories are much richer than the literature suggests, and much richer than the way you dismiss our progress as women. We have done well. We have done well. What we have not done, what has not happened is, it hasn't been commensurate with our struggles. Where we are today has not been commensurate with our struggles. As for the struggles, we have struggled. Now, let's fast forward. Now remember, then we had the World Conferences on Women, where me and Yemisi were always on one platform or the other. The World Conferences threw all of us, then young women like me, I was in my 30s, early 30s, threw us onto the platform. We were all preparing to go to Beijing, China. That's how come when the people came back from Beijing, they started calling every woman in Nigeria Beijing. It was a real movement. At that time, people came together. And then we moved on. Then Jade Sola now said, we are coming into civil governance. This was about 1999. And she led us. We formed a political party for women, a women's only political party. We even went on to wrote a constitution that embodied our language, embodied our issues, and presented it to the Nikki Toby Commission. She led over 2,000-3,000 of us in Abuja to go and make that presentation. State after state, we debated that constitution and adopted it. These were some of the struggles that we took. In that same Lagos, Mrs. Oshomo wanted to be governor of Ondo State. Papa Ayo Adebanjo said, where from? Kofo Kufuruji was deputy governor, wanted to be governor. Again, where from? Women rose up. People, me, young woman like me at the time, what did I know about big Otumbas and everything? We joined and we said, no, a woman has to be. We even went and picketed his house, that of Ayo Adebanjo in Apapa then. We went to picket his house and said he was preventing Mrs. Oshomo from running from, and Mrs. Kufuruji from doing that. So these are what I call them strong movements. It's not about Nkoyo because other people were talking about it and we just joined in because why? There was something that connected us all onto the platform. A movement has to be connected to something. A movement has to be connected to something. Before we start to look at the journey of the future, what is it that ElectHer is connected onto? I mean, boss, I must speak to you like someone who's also run an NGO. When we start with grandiose idea. Does this idea connect and resonate with many other people? If you go on with ElectHer and you don't resonate whatever you are trying to do with the multiplicity of interest, then you are already on the wrong track. Let me give you the case of Women for Women, which was my last big attempt at a women's movement. And I would like to title my presentation today, the way I would like to talk about it is, we take off and we fizzle. We take off and we fizzle. That is the problem with the women's movement. We take off and we fizzle. All these events I have narrated as very significant in their own time. My organization, the Gender and Development Action, wrote the first ever political agenda for Nigerian women. We have one, and it was a big, massive summit there in Festac. We did it in Festac in 1996, where we came up with that document. Women have their own political agenda as far back as 1996, 96 or 97, I can't remember. Quick forward. In 2018, we tried to do something. We, the PDP women, came out of a party where we had a convention, and at that convention, our constitution says 35% and not one respect for that 35%. We came out of a convention in which the National Executive Committee had agreed that there will be 2 deputies to the chairman of the party, one of which must be a woman. We mobilized ourselves and said, we don't want you people this time to say, where are the women? The women did not come out. Every position we had a credible woman for, and we brought better candidates than men to fill those positions. We mobilized ourselves within the party to do that. Do you know that every single case lost it? I am talking of people like the former Minister for Women Affairs, Ina Chiroba, former Minister for Finance, Esther Nanadi Usman. I am talking of people like Dame Imeudom, who was a presidential aspirant. I'm talking of people like Uju Ogoko, who has been one of the most vocal people in the young persons in the party. Many of them came out. Dr. Baraka Umar. All of these women ran for positions in the party. Not one won. We were so disgusted and said, what's the point? We get the legislation into the constitution, it doesn't work. We're asking for affirmative action, they reject it at the National Assembly over and over. Yet, the young people come up with not too young to run. In one session of the National Assembly, it passes. The women have been trying since my time in the National Assembly to get a law to pass to allow affirmative action to happen. They will die. It dies in the National Assembly. To use bad language, what the hell is going on? So we decided, look, we looked at our other political parties around. The story wasn't even any better. PDP had even tried a little bit. APC was worse than ourselves. We reached out to the APC and said, okay, this thing is happening across board with all of us women. Now this is when movement, the language of movement begins to be, for you to have the nuances of the language of movement. We reached out to APC and smaller parties and said, let us come together and do what we need to do. And then we started something called the Women for Women, which I have written an article on. I can share it with you in due course once it's published on the story, its beginning, its origins, and where it went to. Bottom line is, do you know that internally, that is a story for another day. The contradictions within the women's group fizzled out that effort. Now, do we throw away that effort because it has been fizzled out by the internal contradictions? No. Is that history unimportant? No. Is there lessons to be learned? Absolutely. Why? The moment where we started the movement too close to an election, people had already taken their interest. APC was suspecting PDP, PDP was suspecting PDP. Right in there, we were not just party people. The NGOs said, oh, the politicians are too vocal in this thing. We, the NGOs, are not interested in these things. You know, we then started falling back
Divides.
into our little enclaves. And then the center did not hold as it ought to. There were all internal problems. Now let us go forward to the future, because we have learned some lessons there. Women for Women isn't dead. There was a very powerful movement. We are right in our colors and our thousands in Abuja, and we marched on the streets of Abuja from every part of this country to say, then we are afraid that the numbers in the 2019 election would be decimal. We came up with a charter of demands and asked the political parties to use the charter of demands as a campaign document and bring the issues of women to the mainstream of their political engagement. All of that, of course, the momentum to keep it going, where we could make the votes of women count. Because if the votes of women start to count, we can then bring our agenda and use it to negotiate with the men when the votes begin to count. That didn't happen. So that was another huge lesson. Timing is important. If you want more women elected in 2023, now is the time to start. In the next year, this time next year, or towards the end of next year, we already have decided that we don't want to talk to each other. We are now in competition with one another. So the common things that bind us together begin to crack in the center. So how do we go forward, my
No, so Ma, before we go forward, let's just sort of take away some of those things that you've already shared, because you've shared
all right, let me stop here.
Yes,
okay,
ma'am.
So let me stop there.
Yes, so you've shared a lot, and I can see the chat really going off because of the rich, yes, because of the rich history. No, we'll come back shortly. Because of the rich history, and really that's why, and I'm so glad that we're recording this session, because you know it's something that we should go back on and listen to. And I hear you clearly.
Need to probe it,
yes. And I hear you clearly
when you know what people like Jade Sola did.
Yes.
I mean, you should write books on that woman.
Exactly. So I hear you very well when you say the struggle has been real and the struggle has happened, but it hasn't led to commensurate results. Yes, which is very evident. So that's one of the key takeaways. The second thing that I hear you very clearly on is the fact that a movement is not an organization.
It's a movement.
Right, so putting it in current context, for all of us who are living in this day and time, the Black Lives Matter is a movement, right? Yes, because it cuts across, you know, whether creed, religion, and all of that. People are coming out, even though they're not even black skinned. So I hear you very much on that, and how we can really learn a lot from movements that have happened in the past. I was at least part of the Women for Women group, you know, so I know some of the things that were happening there, and then how we take it forward. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about something. So, considering that women have grown up in this society where there is a role that you're expected to play in the home, right? And then all of a sudden you're telling this same woman, right, who has played this particular role to go and play the role of a leader, right? Whether that leader is obviously in this context is the political sphere, but how do we expect that women can play that role? And perhaps this is one of the reasons why we fizzle out, for example, because I think that that's also a very powerful chart that you're living in. So we take off and then we fizzle out, right? Which is not the story we want to be telling going forward. So, Ms. Ransome Kuti, let's hear your thoughts on how this woman that has grown up, you know, to be a good housewife and to be a good mother, you know, and those are the things that she knows. You expect her to go and lead, you know, a transformative either movement or take on a position that would really lead to real change.
Thank you, Abosede. Thank you, Nkoyo, for the broad tapestry you've painted of the history behind movements. And I'm so happy you zeroed in on the fizzling out part of it. And the little narrative I gave before you spoke was to talk about the underlying challenges that create this stop and start. Because if you are, as Abasade and you rightly pointed out, a movement is organic. You know, it usually comes because something happened, or there's an issue that is sort of eating into the fabric of a society, and people are trying various ways. I mean, Black Lives Matter wasn't the first movement that, you know, they've had their Martin Luther King, they've had, you know, various movements will come around an issue, be challenged, fired up by it, and they may fizzle out, they may not, but if the issue remains, you keep, you know, these things will keep erupting and continue to challenge the status quo in the society. And what makes a difference is the slow movement. While the movements are happening, the challenges are happening, the pain that some of these issues cause, because people are dying because there's no good governance. Some families are in pain because we didn't have a good health system that would take care of coronavirus, you know. So as that is going on, you see that with the evolution of the other systems in the society, like the education sector, like the governance sector, like the holistic awareness that society comes into over time. Because this thing is organic. It's not something that somebody sits somewhere and opens a door and everything is abracadabra. Because other things are happening as well. Why did Black Lives Matter take off at this time to become a global movement? It's not that they have not been killing Blacks in America for decades. They've been killing them. They've been killing them the way they killed George Floyd, is it?
Yes.
Uh-huh. They've been killing them like that. People have seen it. People have experienced it. They had that whole massacre in Tulsa that they're celebrating today. A whole town was completely burnt down because of, remember the lady that called the police and said a Black man was threatening her in the park. I hope you all saw that. And thank goodness to technology, because that is another evolution that's happening behind the scene that made it possible for the person that was being accused to have evidence that, you see me, I'm not threatening anybody. Those are the things that we all, as society's custodians, have to be paying attention to. What's happening in the education sector? What's happening in the health sector? What's happening in infrastructure? The person that doesn't have lights, does not have water, does not have, you know, the necessary, just the basic needs of life. The person that does not have job, the young man who's graduating tomorrow, who knows that there's no way he's going to get employment. There's no way he's going to get loan from the bank because it's double digit interest. So we have to be paying attention to all the other things that will make that movement come to life in a global sense, where everybody will be aware of it. It will be easy for people to understand what you're talking about because people have been educated. Because society have come to realize that there are some practices that may be cultural or traditional that are really not good for us, and they have abandoned it. That there are some issues that, because even like this Black Lives Matter, is beginning to make us think about what is the role of Africa in the racist issue. Are we not the ones who sold these people to the whites? We keep blaming colonials. We keep blaming the white people for disrespecting, for humiliating, for killing our own children that we sold to them for, money, for lucre. Now, isn't it time for us to begin to think as Africans? Isn't it time to take responsibility for our own systems and make it possible? And is it possible that we are still doing the same thing? Are we still selling our young people into slavery? Are we still looking at each other as less than? Is it possible that the fault is with us individually? So because if we begin to accept these things, as the white people have done, that's why you see all the white people on the streets, they have come to the realization that the issue is not the politician or the godfather or whoever you want to play, or the colonials or the military or all these other people that we like to blame. The issue is us, each one individually. What are we beginning to look at? What are we beginning to think about how we have infrastructure in place so that people can begin to think of politics? Men cannot go into politics, and that's part of the fizzling out. The men are looking and saying, look, you women, the men that you say are very powerful, we can't get in there. The ordinary man cannot get into politics in Nigeria if he does not have a godfather.
That's true. That's true.
He can't. And the ones who get in know that they may have to sell their soul, their grandfather and their grandmother to get in. And when they get in, they have the kind of conflict you are seeing in Edo State. You see? So how many women want to go through all of that and still be worrying about their children and their grandchildren and all the rest of that? So let's, I hope I'm making it clear that before this women's movement can actually take the kind of energy that I want you, the young generation that's coming, and I look at you and I'm so proud of you. You're so beautiful, you're so intelligent, you're so creative, you have the energy, you have the, I don't want to see this die. So don't just concentrate on, we want women in politics. See, we women movement, we want it politics. And not look at the underlying issues that will make it fizzle out once again, because you are not holding systems accountable, because you're not educating your own children at home, the ones that you have, the people that are talking about women. I saw one senator telling on TV saying she kneels down when she gives her husband food. What is she teaching her children? What message? That woman that is subservient to her husband wants me to believe that when she gets to be a governor, she will be independent-minded, that she will be able to take decisions on her own, that she will be looking after my interests, not the interest of some political godfather. So this is later on, I want to also let us begin, all of us who are here, to begin to look at the things one by one. Is it training the boys to be independent and the girls to be independent and the boys to begin to do housework? I want you to go down to the basic day-to-day things in your own lives that you think maybe, contrary to the message you are going to put out into the general public.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much. So one of the things that I hear you say, and Ambassador Nkoyo, we're bringing you on now, but one of the things I hear Mr. Ransome Kuti saying, and I hear it very well, is that most times, right, the women's movement has people who are passionate, who genuinely want to see change, but then they also are faced with real issues and challenges, whether these are personal, whether these are, where do I get money to feed my family, whether this is, so there are real needs that conflicts us, or that leads to compromises, or that leads to when somebody maybe calls us to the side and says, leave that women's movement that you are doing, come and take, you know, a political position, and just leave those people to be singing and dancing and shouting, right? And then we actually compromise. So she's saying that, look, we can mobilize and we can bring together energies, but when it comes down to it, there are fundamentals that makes these energies easily dissipate, because it is not, maybe the root is not strong, and there are little issues, you know, it's like how the Bible says, little foxes spoil the vine. There are little things that we need to deal with that, unfortunately, when we are coming face to face with that movement, it's almost like you're not confident enough that you can stand when you are coming face to face with it. So what are your thoughts on this? And then obviously this is also a good time to start to talk about how we can move forward, which is what you wanted to speak to earlier.
So thank you very much. And just to say that I get a bit passionate about the history, because I was part of it as a very young woman. Yes. And I really saw some of these women put their hearts to what they were doing. And I have no doubt in my mind that younger women would like you, would also do the same. And hopefully our journey as women and the histories which we're leaving behind and the legacies which we see into the future will stand. Let me, before I address the status of women, because this is about where are women, what's the status of women, class, issues of economic standing, and several social standings and everything of women. Start by saying, what I think my sister Yemisi was saying, we live in a very disruptive political space. Whether it's for a man or for a woman, the culture of our politics, the culture of the space in which we do our politics and engage with the political processes is extremely disruptive. Look, like she said, look at what's happening in Edo State. Whether you're a man, whether you're a woman, whether you are culturally brought up or unculturally brought up, whether you are a feminist or a non-feminist, that environment is very destructive. So in the country, the disequilibrium of that kind of space makes it difficult for us to do the kind of analysis you are talking about. What is it really that is keeping women out? Is it that space or that kind of politics, or is it the culture that defines it? Because as Yemisi says, it takes a certain brand of even men to get into the politics of the times in which we find ourselves. So we need to also contextualize it. For many men, they don't want to be associated with the kind of politics we have themselves. For many of us who are not like those men and who do not also have the restrictions of being culturally defined, someone like me, my inability to access those political spaces, it's not because of my culture, it's not because of my status, it's because I, first and foremost, am one of the women who say to myself, if I don't get in, how do I tell the story? Who is going to tell the story? Who is going to be the one to say, this is why women didn't get in? I don't want to self-exclude because the situation is difficult, but I do know that I have my limits. I have my flaws. I cannot go beyond below a certain floor when I'm engaging. It doesn't mean because I want to be speaking up for women and being in that space and engaging and negotiating for women, I must give up on certain basic values which I represent. And I think women need to understand this in politics. You can be in politics and define the kind of politics you want to play. When I was in the National Assembly, I didn't do oversight because I knew what was the underlying problem of oversight. I decided to myself that I will not go to a place and see the construction of something was not done properly, and I'll go and be part of people who say it's been done. I made a choice. I elected not to be part of that process. So you can actually be in politics and elect the things that you want to do and the things that you don't want to do. Why am I saying this? Because the more we say that the political environment in which we have is horrible, the less we are likely to even engage with it. And it's not just about the women alone, it's also about even the right kind of men coming into that space. The other thing, of course, which you need to think about, Bosse, is the shrinking nature of tolerance. If you look at many of our states now, it's governed by ex-militants, ex-thugs, particularly those of us who come from a certain region. In the north, it is people who have been either, who have negotiated in the past with Boko Haram, or had talked to them, or have spoken to certain types of people. So the political space is being taken over and is shrinking The level of tolerance is shrinking. So it doesn't matter whether your culture is persuasive or non-persuasive. That space is not as open and tolerant as it used to be. Lastly is that there are so many countervailing narratives that we are dealing with. Are we restructuring? Are we breaking up? Are we self-determining? Are we having Biafra? Are we having Oduduwa? There's so many counter narratives we are dealing. So in a sense, our issues begin to become subsumed and irrelevant in the mix of things. So you don't even have the chance of saying, you know, why are women not there? Why are women not on the table? Your issues are not on the table because in a normal situation, they were always conflictual in the way the society looked at it. And now when you have all these other contending issues, it is actually put in the back burner and it's of very little relevance. So when we start talking more about no money, no this, there are many women with money who cannot access. There are many women who are very bold, they cannot access. There are very many women who say they will do it and still cannot access. So it's a very challenging situation. That's why we need the movement. We need a movement that continues to open that space out, make that space less constricting, defines what represents the representation of women. And let me speak to that very quickly. If you want to build that movement beyond ElectHer and go beyond it to other people, you need to look for what we call connected connectors. What do I mean by that? People who are connected. So if you came to my political party, the PDP, for example, who do you know in the PDP? How connected is that person you know to the people who make the connections that change the environment? We don't, you know, you can say, oh, I have somebody I speak to in the PDP, I have somebody, or you come to Lagos State and you don't have access to Asiwaju Tinubu. I mean, you know that you're not connected to the connectors. You know, there are certain kinds of connection. Does that mean that you are endorsing godfatherism? That is a conversation for another day. That's a conversation for another day. And that's part of the problem. Are women ready to understand the game? And how do they play the game? And what are they ready to? I am not prescribing anything, but I'm saying that if you want to begin to build a movement that works for us, it must be connected to the connectors. The other thing is that we must come with a new brand, a new power brand that demands that the power, we need power. How are we speaking as women that we want power? Women are very apologetic about the fact that, you know, if my husband, if my this, you know, we are very apologetic. And I think sometimes that's a problem because we don't speak the power story about what we want to do with power. Like Yemisi said, the countries that are best run today are run by women in terms of this pandemic. We don't even speak about what women bring to leadership. We don't give examples of how we can be actually the change that women need. I have been chatting recently with Obieze Kwesili, and Obieze Kwesili sent me a message which I'm going to live with for the rest of my life, and I hope that that is true. She said, Nkoyo, and I'm going to share it with you at the end. Nkoyo, watch it. The change that the country needs will be led and brought about by women. That's what she said. It's beginning to happen. Look at what's happening around issues of rape. Suddenly the entire country we have almost brought the country to a standstill to recognize the issue of rape. Why can't we? That's a movement. That's a moment in our history. It's like the Black Lives Matters. It's like the George Floyd situation. What makes this moment important and doesn't make another moment important? I think it's partly because when we are talking about these things, we talk about, we want you to stop rape, but we don't talk about the power that we need in order to enforce the things that we're trying. We see it as an event. We don't see it as a process. We don't see it as a long-term engagement. The third thing I want to talk about quickly is we need to lower barriers. And I'm sure very people will say, what's Nkoyo talking about? How do you bring many more people into this level of language me and Yemisi are talking about? Is this the language of a movement? I mean, even the way Yemisi pronounces her words, you know, it's definitely not the language of, sorry, my sister, I just was pulling your legs because this is the old way you used to talk. You're still talking like that. So if we're talking about movement.
I'm in the midst of very enlightened women now.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, but I've seen you do the other one.
That's the thing where I go talk.
I thought they see you for that other one too. I see you in the other one. So yeah, you see what what I'm saying is that look, we need to lower the barriers and flatten the ground a bit.
Yes.
So that we bring a lot more people in. If it's a movement, a lot more people must believe. And this is a moment. That's why I'm saying to you, do something. It's a moment because an issue like rape and sexual violence can open up a whole number of things for us and start a conversation which we want to see happen. What's the last thing I said? We need to create a situation where more women participate. And I'm sure if I end up by saying we need to find leaders who are adaptive, you will understand what I'm saying. We need to bring adaptive leaders in, people who are ready to be flexible, because me and you have been talking about how can we even be adaptive in this kind of a difficult environment? How do we navigate? You know, like if you listen to Yemisi, Yemisi said, look, this environment is horrible. And I agree with her completely. But how are women going to navigate? And if we don't have an answer for how younger women are going to navigate and join us or bring us in as older women, I don't know what the future is. But let me stop there by saying that this would be my thoughts on how we go into the future. The future must think about how do we lower the bar so that many more people come. This is not about NGOism. It's about a movement. A movement is an inclusive, participatory platform which brings into it. And it must be cross-national. It's not something that just is happening at the level of Lagos. Lagos tends to represent the movement because everybody is there. It's a mixing pot, which is great. They can lead the process, but we must think of how we suck in the rest of the country into what that movement represents. So that would be my closing thoughts.
Thank you so much. I mean, that's a lot that you've left us with and a lot to take in. And like I said, I'm so glad that not only do we record these and make this available, but we also share like a communique of sorts afterwards. And I'm so excited for all the rich points that will come out of that. But we have an audience that have been very patient, and I can see that the chat has been going off. So I want to give an opportunity to our participants and attendees to share their thoughts or ask a question. We have a few more minutes. We would need to let our guests go soon. So please make it short and sweet. But please, if you would like to say something, raise your hands. And you can do that right next to your, okay, I've got a hand raised. And I will just unmute you and allow you to speak. So Marie, you're coming up now. You have exactly 1 minute or maybe 2. Go ahead.
Mute, okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yes, okay. Thanks, good to see you again, Nkoyo and Yems.
Thank you, Marie.
Good to see you, hi. Well, I'm happy Nkoyo has focused this thing. I don't believe that Nigerian women have successfully had a movement. So we can't say we've had a movement. Because if we had a movement, we would have gotten what we gathered around as a movement. Like the suffragettes, they had a movement, it was for the vote, and they got it after 100 years, but they stuck to it. The women's rights movements, they had it, and they went until they got all the rights and everything that they needed. And it was, like she said, cross-border, cross-state, bring everybody in and stuff. You work together as women. That has been our problem of starting and fizzling. And we work together as women. Women's groups have come. They've done a lot. Yes, the First Ladies movement, I'm saying for the first time, is the only movement that I think is subsisting because they came together, they had the power, they had the resources, what is it called, the enabling environment, and they were able to do things. Mrs. Babangida left Later Life Program for rural women. She gave us a women's commission. She gave us the women's thing in Abuja, the women's center. Handed over the baton. Mrs. Babacha came, say what you like about it. She did the National Hospital till tomorrow. That was her project. She gave us, it was under her watch that we got the ministry. So we moved from a department of women in the social welfare ministry to a national commission given to us by Mrs. Babangida, to a ministry, which was what took us to Beijing. And on one day, we got 36 women commissioners in the whole of the country. Women were empowered. We were looking for 35% or the 35% empowerment and stuff. We got women ministry, we got whatever. So that, for me, is a movement that is even staying on now, because you can see that some other of these women, the new first ladies, are doing something like Mrs. The lady of Ekiti, Mrs. Fayemi. She's very good. She's leading this rape thing, and she's getting her people together, and I can see them mobilizing and working as a movement. But why will you and I not be able to sustain a movement of even gathering all NGOs to work together? we have foremost NGOs, but they have fizzled off into gongos. And so when you are a gongo, you can't talk. So they use you to go and dance in the political arena. They give you a tampa, they give you gele, they give you 5,000 naira, and they say, and you sell your vote. Something Mrs. Kuti said was that, oh, we let go a situation where we used to have deputy governors, and now we allowed, and we didn't hold on to it. Did we as women elect them or put her there? We did not. I can't say that it was women that put the deputy governor there. So if women didn't put her there, women cannot hold on to what they didn't put. You can't give what you don't have. So those are the issues we've got to look at. Why would women go a begging and a sorrowing whereas we are the majority? We have more women votes that can put people where we want to put them, for as long as we believe in one ideology and we can rally together, come together and stay with that focus ideology as a movement till we get there. Some will drop, some will, but you continue and continue and to continue until you get to that thing that brought you all together. The ideology of the movement can never die if you have committed and convicted women. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ma. I mean, your passion and energy. Thank you so much for that. Okay, so we'll move on to Priscilla. I hope.
Can I just answer her question about the women allowing like in Lagos State, where the deputy governor.
No, so let's just take a few of the comments and then we'll.
Okay.
Yes, thank you very much. Okay, so Priscilla, sorry, I think I already unmuted you. Please go ahead. Priscilla? Hello? Oh, she's on mute, yes. Go ahead. Maybe it's your network. It's dragging a little bit. Priscilla, we're gonna have to move on.
Can you hear me better now?
Yes, yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, so I thank you. I'm calling from a rural community, so my network is a little bit poor.
No,
I just want to thank the speakers for this opportunity. I'm really glad.
Priscilla, we're struggling to hear you. Can you type your question? And I'm so sorry.
Madam Nkoyo, and especially movements, because one of the challenges. Okay.
Hello? If you can try to wrap up quickly, because we were beginning to hear you at the latter part.
Okay. So can you hear me now?
Yes.
I wanted them to help. Okay. I wanted both speakers to help me address some retrogressing today. For example, the ministries of women catered for women's issues are currently being rebranded.
Oh, so Miss Priscilla, I'm so sorry. It keeps dragging. Oh, sorry.
Let's have men.
Please, can I beg you to put it in the question? Can I beg you, please, to put it in the question?
Women issues are social.
Miss Priscilla, I'm so sorry. I'm going to have to beg you to put it in the question and answer so that we can really, really get your question. I know you were talking about the women's ministries, so we would really like to get that question. So let me move on to Felicia. Felicia, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Good evening, and thank you, panelists, for the beautiful contributions you've made today. I just want to lend my voice to the issue of women movement. You know, when Auntie Marie spoke about the women's movement as she knew it, you know, I actually thought I should actually to say that most of the women she had mentioned about the legacies that those women had left were coming from extreme power points and their own kind of PowerPoint was not the kind of movement that I want to say we are looking at. They had the power of their husbands being the leaders at such times, and they were able to take decisions that they took at that time for the existence of the institutions that she referred to. For the women movement and the work of civil society, civil society had its own challenge in terms of financing some of the things that she may want to say, well, these are the things that we hold on to as women's movement. But I will say that the civil society sector had actually tried, and we continue to work hard to bring more people on board. Nkoyo had led a lot of movements on her own. We know of movements that had taken place in the past, and these women were also not wives of governors or wives of presidents. They were just ordinary women who felt that the vices in the society was not going to be beneficial to women, and they felt that, and they fought for it. Mrs. Ransome Kuti was one of them, and then Madame Gambo Sawaba in Zaria was one of them. And we also had Margaret, Ekpo, and we had the Aba Women Riot. Aba Women Riot was a spontaneous thing that became very formidable in the history of Nigeria. And there are such things coming up these days. You will see the way civil society had worked, had come out to fight against the issue of the scourge of rape in this country. That's the movement. Those are the kind of movements we are talking about, things that come out in a sporadic way. And we have the issue of no women participation in politics. Women are participating in politics. It is not the civil society that gives wrapper to women. It is not the civil society that tell women to go dance at political rallies. It's the politicians. Civil society is vehemently against women taking wrapper, and we have been talking about it. And we've been talking to women, severally, not to take anything from anybody. And if they do, but they should still vote their conscience. They should vote for whoever they need to vote for. But on the issue of movement, again, there are challenges. There are challenges, but we will surmount those challenges. And with the help of Action Aid program, Action Aid and the Canadian, that have supported quite a few non-governmental organizations to today step up their ability to campaign and fight for issues. We will begin to have the kind of call we are looking at, call for more women to come out to speak against what's going on in our society, and to have a momentum that will be taken, that will be there for the next 5 years. We will get it.
Thank you very much.
I wouldn't call, like Miriam Babangida, for example. She started a movement, the Better Life for rural women. Yes, but the reason why that one had a lot of strength at that time was because her husband was the president. And she had the clout, the ability to go to call on every woman in every community in this country and bring them also to the center to speak and to support her cause. How many NGOs have that kind of money today? But we will get there, however, because we'll get there through the interest of the Nigerian woman on the streets. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Okay, so Ibijoke, I'm just gonna allow you speak, and then we will let our guests respond. Take our closing charges. Oh, I see that we have one more hand. I'm sorry, the time is never enough, unfortunately. But go ahead, Ibijoke. Did I? Ibijoke, is that? Go ahead, Ibijoke.
Hi, Ambassador, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much, Ambassador Nkoyo and Madam Yemisi Ransome Kuti. It's been a very insightful conversation. And I'm also just trying to read from the chat section as well, so that I can just sort of blend that into my question. In terms of moving forward, I think it will be great to know, one thing is people talking about the intergenerational approach, because there's the problem of ageism as well, whether we like it or not. And what I want to talk about is there are a lot of young people that sort of voiced out the fact that when they meet older people, right, that have been into one sort of movement or pushing for a particular action, they sometimes feel a bit undermined in the sense that, you know, they come across as, what exactly do you have to offer? Do you know what we've done? So how do we blend that approach to ensure that the older generation do not feel that we are underestimating, you know, the role, the critical role they've played to where we've gotten now, and also, you know, what the future generation can do to ensure that we can fill in the existing gaps at the moment. So that intergenerational approach, you know, how do we blend it in a very practical way? And the second one is, we're currently enjoying, I mean, even though, you know, it's based on unfortunate incidences, for example, the rape situations, and, you know, God bless the departed. How can we leverage current momentum? Because we're seeing the world come, it's beyond Nigeria now, right? I kind of feel like if we're steadfast in the fight against rape in Nigeria, it could become a global movement, just as the Black Lives Matter, if the Black Lives Matter has become a global movement, right? How do we build on that momentum? Because it's like people are finally paying attention. And then a follow-up to that will be the success story from the COVID-19 pandemic. Our female president, you know, have been able to curb the spread and really showcase their leadership abilities. How do we begin to tell the story, to attract, like Ambassador Nkoyo said, a movement should be collective. People should have the buy-in. How do we get people to really resonate with these stories, with the current momentum, to have their buy-in, to have their commitment, and to have the dedication towards the cause we're trying to fight for? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ibijoke. So what I'm going to do now is, Ms. Junaid, if you can just give us your question in 1 minute, I'm going to unmute you, but then, you know, we had promised Priscilla that I'll take her question and she's put it in the chat, and then we'll let our guests wrap up, give us their closing chart, their responses, and we can go forward. So Abimbola Junaid, please, go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much to the panelists and Sister Yemisi, Ms. Nkoyo. So really good to be able to join you guys. I'll say 3 things quickly. The first one, to the younger generations that have worked with older women and they feel insecure. I would say to you that look closely. There are good old you can work with. I'm one of such persons, and I've worked closely to Sister Yemisi. I haven't met Mrs. Nkoyo, but I used materials as well as GADA in my master's program 10 years ago. And I came back to Nigeria and I worked with Ms. Ada, who continued to run GADA. So many of them. So you need to know what you want to, the sort of leader you want to follow. And then when you seek them out, definitely they would provide you that space. Secondly, what I would like to say is we talk about the suffragette movement and we've talked about the past movement. But I think what we're missing out and why the Black Lives Matter is really working now is because they're so local. They are formed locally. You know, they start organically at the local stages. And if you look at our political parties, they have their wards. They have their it's called wards and councils and stuff that the women meet regularly. That is where we need to start. We need to go back to the grassroots. We need to understand the women. We need to be able to know the women on our streets. Who are the leaders of the representative of our movement on our street that understands the issues? And we've all been supporting now during the COVID. So that is the buying that we can actually harness by making sure that those women we've been working with to uphold them in this crisis now understand that there is a bigger body of women group that would actually allow them in and be a part of making themselves empowered. And that is how we can gain momentum. I'll just stop there, but actually there is more. Thank you.
I was muted, I'm sorry. So we had promised Priscilla that we'll take her question, so I'll just read it out briefly. How can we address the shrinking of the civil space and women's platforms? We are currently witnessing retrogression, which is a grave concern. The ministries of women were the sole establishment for women issues, but they are currently being rebranded and the focus is being lost. So let me, Ambassador Nkoyo, let me start with you, and then Ms. Ransome Kuti will come to you and we'll just wrap up. You can please throw in there your 3 recommendations. Obviously for women aspirants looking at 2023, but also for the women's movement. And if you can, specifically the women's political movement, which we know affects every other thing, but again, I'm happy to be schooled if there's a difference. But please, let's Ambassador.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much. Very quickly, just to start with Priscilla's very interesting question. Absolutely, we said that there was a shrinking of space for even credible leadership in Nigeria, and even a worse situation for women. She talks about the rebranding of the Ministry of Women Affairs, particularly in Edo State where that has happened, and the lack of focus. I think what we need to do, based on the comments by the last but one speaker, is it's time to flip things around. We now have a major agenda on the table, these issues of rapes and violence against women, which is driving our group, our movement to come back together. It's also a moment for us to begin to make other demands. And one of the demands is asking ourselves what these platforms represent. I think we haven't also analyzed and examined enough whether these platforms actually deliver on our agendas or not. Part of the reasons why these ministries have become extremely uninteresting to many of us is that they have allowed themselves to be tucked under the Office of the Wives of the Governors and become an extension of the Wives of the Governors agenda, and therefore used for the politics of the governor himself. So by extension, they have become a mechanism for mobilizing the women to support the husbands of political leaders. So that's quite problematic. We cannot just say defend and keep them, but we also need to say bring them back, but bring them back in a different context and rebrand them. A quick thought about how do we build momentum around this rape? I talked about why I started the whole discussion about what a movement should be doing. And I talked about the lowering of standard, and somebody didn't quite understand what I meant by lowering of standard. I think it's the last point that someone made about, look, we need to know who our neighbors are and start from the local. For you to be able to bring someone, if you used all the language of gender-based violence, violence against women and girls, CEDAW and all of that, how do you get the local involved in that kind of language? But when you tell the local that, look, that child that was raped, what do we do about it? And the action and your response starts from a raped child, and the fact that you say, I no go agree to that raped child, then you can build the kind of inclusion. So that's what I was saying, that one of the things we need to do looking forward is how we lower the bar in the barriers that we call them barriers, but these are the things that keep a lot of us out. And also, you have asked a bit of a question, Ambassador, about the political women. That gap, political movement is very different from NGO. Bosse, see how I hold your ear. Political movement is different from NGO. NGO doesn't come to our rescue when we are in politics. I have run 4 elections. I started as an NGO person. I will end my life as an NGO person. I do not see NGOs when I'm running an election. The person who talked about the ward level, these are people that have been benefiting from the party over the years. When there's a meeting, they're invited. When there's a conversation, when there are palliatives, they get it. These people only know the people who have organized them over the years. If we want to make a connection between our issues, which is canvassed by NGOs like rape, with our political class, we need to move more into the political space. There is a political space. We need to speak the language of the political space. There is a political space. Our votes must begin to count. When we show men that, look, because they now know, I don't know how many of you saw the video of that man from Bauchi, that senator from Bauchi, that said even him being in the National Assembly was on account of the votes of women. And therefore, he was actually advocating that they should cut off the pennies of the men who have raped women, you know. Very powerful thing that guy talked about, spoke to the fact that women actually are the ones who control the vote. Have we made a connection between our votes and the power that is within us? So the NGOization of politics will not work. We have to let the NGOs begin to understand that the political women are competitive. It's about interest. They do not think about women. They think about where their political party will take them. How do we penetrate those political spaces and make them accountable to you? On the older women, I can just say, like the other speaker say, you will always find older women who can guide you. The question is, are younger women teachable? It's one thing to talk about the older women and the complexes of the older women, but are younger women teachable? So my comments going forward for ElectHer would be, start the recruitment. I think we've had that conversation about today before, and it must be done before the end of this year. By next year, we will not be listening to you people. Start the recruitment, get us into the ward system from ward. You saw when they were trying to suspend Oshomole. You saw when this man, Obaseki, he had to go to the ward and start at the ward. The ward system is important. Let us recruit. Let us now create this movement connection between the NGOs and the political movement. NGOs also must also learn to subject themselves to this politics of the South. They have to understand the language of the politics. They cannot come with a high level of, we know what we want, we know it all, and think the politicians will listen. They are not communicating to the politicians. The politicians have their language. You only communicate with them when you have power yourself, not because you know the language and the English. If it had to do with the English, they wouldn't be going to the creeks to look for the boys with the guns to come and fight for them during elections. So it has nothing to do with your English, it has to do with the force. Then lastly, I think we need to also begin to create within the parties a nucleus, which is what we tried to do in the PDP when we said we must take over our 35%, because when men begin to see us taking over our 35%, we go. So therefore, go fight for women's wing. There was a time when in the narratives, and I even was a victim of that narrative, that the women's wing tended to tokenize women. No, we can now organize better. These women leaders are not useful to us in the party. If we had a women's wing, we can now hold the party accountable for the provisions of the Constitution. That's what we need to do. We need to get those women's wings into the party so that the women's wing can say, what are you doing for women in this party? Your Constitution says this, you are not doing what your Constitution says. Those would be my quick recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Mr. Ransome Kuti, please, can we come to you?
Yes, thank you. Thank you. In response to Marie, thanks for coming, Marie. We talked about the women not being in charge of allowing the deputy governor to have been selected, for a woman to have been selected as deputy governor. The way political parties work, these men have to negotiate with women within the political parties. They are often in the majority. They're the ones who campaign for them, feed them, dance for them, mobilize on their behalf. If there had been no negotiation, and if women in Lagos State, even within the political APC political party, I'm not talking of every woman, I certainly, they won't care what I say, but the women within the political party, definitely if the women come together and say, look, as far as deputy governor is concerned, in this Lagos State, from now until kingdom come, it must be a woman. They would have had to hold on to that, and they must hold on to that. And they must have negotiated it away for what happened to have happened. The older women, the question about older ones in the party, look everywhere, you know, old people, don't mind them. And sometimes Alzheimer is kicking in. They have their own issues. You are the ones that must be determined to progress your own agenda. The older ones must also try and respect the young ones. Again, we're coming to tradition. You know, in our tradition, you can't talk when an older person is talking. And this is how they grow up. So you must understand that they're trying, but sometimes it doesn't happen. And you have to navigate that relationship. Mutual respect is what will make it work effectively. Ministry of Women Affairs, National Council of Women Societies, I beg, leave these government agencies to the government people. That is the way government works. Government is always going to try and organize itself to pursue its own agenda. So don't let's waste energy on what they call themselves and how they restructure themselves. It's us that has a problem of organizing better. If we are better organized and we're able to structure ourselves and strategize and be in places where our voices, our agendas are relevant and powerful, then some of these things will reflect our wishes. So let this movement be people-driven. Let it be organic. Let it be inclusive. Let it have young, old, different tribes, you know. It has to be totally all-encompassing for it to work effectively. Because what we're trying to do is not to just have women in politics. We want to have a conducive environment for everyone. Whether you're a woman, a youth, physically challenged, decent person, we want to have a conducive environment for our people to be able to take responsibility for their own development. That is the goal of the women's movement, not just to have women in power. Connecting the connectors, I love Nkoyo saying something about that. Of course, I'm sure many of the people who are complaining about how things are working are friends with the wives of governors, are friends with the wives of the council chairman. They go to church with the person who is powerful, the commissioner for this or that, or the children are in the same school. I find Nigerians are able to disconnect their social life from their political life. You party with them, take their shwebi with them, but you won't discuss politics. You won't engage on the things that really matter. We're very good at organizing around weddings and funerals and all. Let's organize better around these things that matter. You know, and very importantly, we must partner with men. No movement can succeed without having the other critical partner in development working with you. And I know many men who can't wait to have women in leadership. They're tired of what is going on themselves. They want the women, but they have to be brought along in a way where they can effectively engage in the process. And when we are talking of movement, let us support the credible women, the credible individuals. When the men do good things, let us praise them. Let us, when we are also looking at women that we want in the political space, let us make sure we're even more critical of the values, the integrity that woman brings, and the capacity that we don't want just women because they are women. We want women who have the capacity and the credibility to function well. And then the underlying structures I'm talking about in terms of way forward. We must, as part of our agenda, start talking about making politics less attractive than somebody doing an honest business. There's too much money there. That is where you have this dysfunction. And we must start promoting and upholding the right values wherever we are, in our homes, in our communities, in our workplace, everywhere. Those are the values that will begin to seep in and make our movement more relevant and effective. Cultural values, I keep saying it, and traditions, they matter a lot. And unless we begin to breed our young people to have a justice and equality bred in at a very, all you young people, Abosede, you are the ones that have young children. Me, my own have grown up. I have taught them the right values. And I'm still, as their mother, they know they cannot do certain things. Otherwise, I will sit on them like they know what will happen. So these are the sort of things that we must begin to ingrain, train our girls and boys to be independent, values-driven human beings who respect and support each other in all fields of human endeavor. We must be prepared to campaign and support women without looking for remuneration. When I was running for senator in Lagos State, every hand was out, every minute, give me this, give me that. If we want to support this women's movement, it must be voluntary. It must be something we want to do because we believe in it and we're passionate about it. And we don't want anything. We don't even want position as in office. We do it because we believe and we're ready to make sacrifices for our children, not for ourselves. And we must build trust. Another thing that breaks movements is the fact there's no trust.
Yes.
We must build trust amongst ourselves as women. We're very suspicious. It's a good attribute. But when it comes to an external structure like movements, you have to take the extra steps to build that trust, to make sure the process is transparent. Accounting is done and fundraising is done in such a transparent way. Governance structures are so inclusive that everybody has trust in the system. We must advocate for comprehensive constitutional and electoral reforms, because the structure we have at the moment, if you put women there, carry all the men that are there and put women there, it will probably be as dysfunctional as it is right now. So that is part of what we should be looking at. Reduce the cost of participation. You shouldn't have to go and steal to buy the party ticket. You must look at campaign financing and cap donations so that big interest groups, private sector, do not hijack political parties. We must continue to hold the government accountable and political parties also accountable to all those things that they have committed to, increasing women's political participation as voters and as decision makers. Learn from what is happening in Rwanda and Uganda. This is Africa. We're not even looking at Europe. Proportional representation in the electoral system. Reserving seats for women in the legislature. We can begin to campaign for that. We have to start now because it's almost too late, actually. And anybody who's interested in politics, to join political parties, not just because you want to run for office. Just be there as an active member, because if you are part of cooking the soup, then you'll be part of the ones that can dish out whatever comes out when the soup is cooked. Money is critical. We cannot go away from it. We must learn to start raising funds, start systems where somebody can pay 1,000 naira a month. If all the women in Nigeria pay 1,000 naira a month into our movement, we get plenty of money now. So let's look at all these areas where we can have a movement that is sustainable. So without money, you will not be able to sustain it. So if we really want women in politics and a movement that really works, all of us, every single one of us, must work with everyone else. Women at all the levels, market women, all the professional groups, all the men, the labor unions, private sector, all of us need to come together. That movement must speak to the need of everyone in Nigeria. And if we do that and we don't give up, particularly young people, me, I don't tire small. I can be talking with you like this. But if you say, come for rally again, I don't go come on. So you have to be ready. You have to be courageous. If they throw tear gas at you, you must do it. We have done it for you. We fought for the democracy. I was arrested by SSS. We had the tear gas. We did all that work. That is maybe why the knees don't connect as usual. They're supposed to connect anymore. You know what I'm talking about.
Yes, ma'am.
You have that responsibility, but I am so confident in you. Okay. I'm so proud of what you're doing. Okay. I know you can do it. Okay. And don't worry, we're behind the scenes. And that is what I think a lot of older women should also do, and older men, to be more behind the scenes, to support the young people. Occasionally we can come up to speak, but it's your time. It is your responsibility now. We have laid the ground. You can take on the next challenge, and I know you can do it.
Thank you so much. Oh my goodness. You have left us charged, pumped. I don't know what to say, but thank you all so much who joined the ElectHer Webinar Series today. We have been talking about the women's political movement, the journey so far. I mean, I've truly been enlightened today. Rich history that we have. Don't worry, we will send out a communique with some of the major highlights, and then the recording will also be made available on our YouTube page. We all need to watch this again. We all need to, take notes and take significant action steps. And so on behalf of ElectHer, I would like to thank Ambassador Nkoyo-Kogi for your time today and for being so open to share with us. I mean, it's just invaluable. So thank you very much. Like you said,